Okay, so nuclear preparedness. It's well, let's face it, kind of scary stuff,
Definitely a topic that's been on a lot of people's minds lately.
especially with all the news lately.
Yeah, yeah. Especially after President Biden's whole Armageddon comment.
It's definitely got people thinking.
Sure, for sure.
But, I think knowledge is power, right?
Absolutely.
And that's kind of why we're here today,
Yeah.
to really dig into some fascinating sources.
Definitely. We've got government advice, academic perspectives
We even found some historical context,
from places like Northeastern University, The Guardian.
even the American Red Cross.
Yeah.
So our mission for this deep dive is to equip you with the information you need to feel a bit more prepared if the unthinkable were to happen.
Right. And I think it's interesting that you brought up that Armageddon comment. It really does. It echoes the anxieties of the Cuban Missile Crisis.
It does.
It definitely brings us back to that.
And those anxieties are resurfacing in this current time period.
Mm-hmm.
And while nobody wants to imagine a nuclear attack, it just feels like it's something we can't ignore.
Right. Especially considering there are 9 countries
Mm-hmm.
with nearly 13,000 nuclear weapons.
Between them.
It's a lot. And it's not just about intimidation or posturing. Some countries see these weapons as absolutely essential to their national security.
Really?
Yeah, they view it as a way to maintain that balance of power.
Yeah.
And to deter attacks.
But haven't we as a global community, I mean, especially after Hiroshima and Nagasaki,
Right.
haven't we kind of moved past that way of thinking?
You would think so, wouldn't you?
Yeah.
After those devastating events, it kind of created this taboo,
Right.
around the use of nuclear weapons.
Yeah.
And the number of weapons has actually decreased since the Cold War.
Oh, wow.
But, the fact remains, many nations still see these weapons as a necessary evil, a deterrent to prevent larger conflicts.
So it's a really complicated issue
Definitely a lot of different viewpoints to consider.
with a lot of different viewpoints. And then you hear all this talk about tactical nuclear weapons. And I got to say, the word tactical almost makes them sound less frightening.
Right.
Oh, it's just tactical. It's no big deal.
And that's where the real danger lies.
Yeah.
Because tactical does not mean small. These weapons are still incredibly destructive, just because they're designed for battlefield use.
Okay.
Think about it. A tactical nuke could wipe out a huge chunk of a city.
Yeah.
Or an entire battalion just gone.
So not small at all.
Not at all.
And it's important to remember that the Hiroshima bomb was 15 kilotons. The Nagasaki bomb, 21.
Right.
These tactical weapons aren't that much smaller.
No. The potential for large-scale devastation is very real.
So let's talk about what actually happens during a nuclear explosion. What are the immediate effects? What should we be aware of?
Well, it all unfolds in 3 main phases.
Okay.
First, you have the blast itself,
Yeah.
which is a shock wave that travels incredibly fast,
Mm-hmm.
600 to 800 miles per hour.
Wow.
Anything within, say, a several-mile radius of that blast
Yeah.
pretty much faces total destruction.
That's hard to even fathom.
And then immediately after the blast comes the radiation.
Right.
And the most dangerous type in this initial stage is gamma radiation.
Okay.
Gamma rays can actually pass through most materials,
Really?
causing severe burns and damage to living tissue.
And then there's the fallout. I always think of those old Cold War films.
Right.
The mushroom cloud.
The mushroom cloud, yeah, that's what carries the radioactive particles high into the atmosphere. And this material, called fallout, eventually settles back down to Earth. And it contaminates everything it touches, water, soil, you name it.
So it's not just the initial blast.
Well,
It's this lingering threat.
That can persist for days, even weeks after the initial explosion.
Wow. So surviving the blast is just the first hurdle. And then you've got to worry about this invisible radioactive threat.
Exactly. That's why it's so important to shelter in place
Right.
for as long as possible.
To avoid that fallout.
The longer you can avoid exposure, the better your chances of survival.
Okay, I'm starting to understand just how serious this all is. But let's shift gears for a moment and talk about what we can actually do to prepare for a nuclear event.
Okay.
Because it's easy to feel powerless,
Right.
but I know there are concrete steps we can take.
Absolutely.
So what does advice from sources like ready.gov, the American Red Cross, what do they tell us?
Well, first of all, the good news is there are practical steps you can take to increase your chances of survival.
Okay, that's good to hear.
And the first thing is to prepare an emergency kit. just like you would for any other disaster.
Right.
Think about essential medications.
Mm-hmm.
Battery-powered radio, a flashlight,
Right.
plenty of water, and enough food to last you at least a week, if not longer.
So it's really about having those basic supplies on hand.
Yeah, those essentials, just in case. And you also want to think about potential shelters near your home.
Okay.
Work, places you frequent,
Yeah.
basements,
Yeah.
windowless interior rooms, maybe even a subway station. These places can offer some protection.
So it's really about being proactive and
Mhm.
thinking ahead, even though it's kind of scary to plan for.
Of course, of course. Now, if you were to receive a warning that a nuclear attack was imminent, the most important thing is to get inside immediately.
Immediately.
Don't waste time trying to gather supplies
Mm.
or call loved ones. Your priority is to get to safety as fast as possible.
And what about types of buildings?
Oh yeah, brick or concrete structures are ideal.
Okay.
They provide the most shielding from radiation. Once you're inside, stay away from windows,
Right.
head for the basement or central room, preferably one without windows.
Okay, let's say the worst happens and we experience a nuclear explosion. What do we do immediately afterward? Can we go outside?
Absolutely not. It's crucial to stay sheltered for at least 24 hours, maybe longer, depending on the situation.
Wow.
The outside environment is going to be contaminated with fallout. Decontamination is also extremely important.
Okay.
So you'll need to remove your clothing, shower thoroughly.
I've heard that conditioner can actually trap radioactive material. Is that true?
Yes, it's best to avoid using conditioner. It can bind those radioactive particles to your hair.
Okay, so lots to think about in terms of those immediate actions.
Right.
But most importantly, we need to listen to official instructions, guidance from authorities.
Absolutely.
They'll have the most up-to-date information on what to do.
Right. Stay tuned to those emergency broadcasts. Follow their guidance closely. They'll be your best source of information in a situation like that.
They are the experts.
Yeah.
Okay. You know, all this talk about fallout shelters and emergency preparedness reminds me of that Protect and Survive pamphlet
Oh, yeah.
that the UK government put out back in the 1980s. Like, people were told to brick up their windows and store water in their bathrooms. It all just seems a bit absurd now.
Yeah.
What was the thinking behind that?
Well, it really offers this fascinating window
Yeah.
into how people viewed nuclear war back during the Cold War.
Yeah.
It was a product of its time, for sure. Reflecting all those anxieties and fears of that era.
Right.
And the advice given, while well-intentioned,
Yeah.
it was ultimately deemed, impractical and even dangerous in some cases.
Yeah, it seems like such a simplistic approach to such a complex problem.
Right.
Why wasn't there a more modern, updated version of that guidance released?
That's a good question. There are a few reasons, actually.
Okay.
First, our understanding of the effects of nuclear weapons
Right.
has evolved a lot since the 1980s. We now know that the scale of destruction would be far greater than what that pamphlet envisioned. And second, there's this growing recognition that surviving a nuclear attack wouldn't just be about, physical protection.
Right.
You'd also need immense mental and emotional resilience, access to health care,
Yeah.
long-term support for rebuilding communities, all that.
It makes you wonder if is it better to have some guidance, even if it's imperfect,
Yeah.
or to leave people feeling completely unprepared and overwhelmed?
That's a really tough question.
Yeah.
And it's one that experts and policymakers are still grappling with. It's a tricky balance, trying to provide practical information
Yeah.
without causing, unnecessary fear or panic.
Yeah, it's a tough line to walk. But regardless of whether there's official guidance or not, it feels like we can't just bury our heads in the sand
Right.
and pretend this threat doesn't exist.
Absolutely.
Knowledge is power.
100%. Understanding the potential consequences empowers us to make those informed decisions
Right.
and take steps to protect ourselves and our communities.
So as we kind of wrap up this part of our deep dive,
Yeah.
what are some of the key takeaways that you want to leave our listener with?
Well, I think the most important message is that even though the threat is real,
Yeah.
it's not inevitable. And even in the face of this terrifying possibility,
Yeah.
there are things we can do to prepare and to increase those chances of survival.
Right.
Building an emergency kit,
Yeah.
identifying those potential shelters, understanding the phases of a nuclear explosion, and the importance of decontamination.
Right.
All these actions,
Yeah.
can actually make a real difference.
So it's about taking control where we can,
Yeah.
rather than giving in to fear and
Yeah,
helplessness.
exactly. And that sense of agency can make a huge difference,
Yeah.
not just in terms of physical survival,
Right.
but also mental and emotional well-being.
Because being prepared isn't just about stockpiling supplies.
Right.
It's about building that mental resilience,
Right.
fostering a sense of community, having those difficult conversations with loved ones about what to do in an emergency.
Exactly. It's a holistic approach to preparedness,
Mm-hmm.
addressing both the practical and the psychological aspects of this very real threat.
Mm-hmm. It's easy to walk away from this conversation feeling pretty overwhelmed.
Yeah, heavy stuff.
But I'm also struck by something else, like a glimmer of hope.
Tell me more about that. What do you mean?
Even when we're talking about something as bleak as nuclear war, there's still this sense of human goodness, like this incredible potential for resilience and positive action. You know what I mean?
I do. I do. It would be easy to end this whole deep dive on a note of despair.
Mm-hmm.
But I gotta say, I'm inspired by the resilience that humans have shown throughout history when we've faced these incredible challenges.
Exactly. It's like, remember all those survival strategies we talked about?
Yeah.
Building those makeshift shelters, figuring out how to decontaminate, adapting to a totally changed world.
It's remarkable.
It really speaks to our ability to solve problems
Mm.
and find a way to persevere no matter how tough things get.
Yeah, it's not just some abstract concept either,
Right.
It's happening right now all over the world. You see people coming together, supporting each other, finding solutions to these really complex problems.
It's like, okay, yes, the threat of nuclear war is terrifying, but it also kind of highlights just how strong the human spirit is. You know, how adaptable we can be.
I couldn't have said it better myself. So tell me, what stands out to you? What are you going to take away from all of this?
I think for me, it's the importance of knowledge and preparation. It's so easy to feel powerless when you're facing a threat this massive, but even those small actions, they can make a huge difference.
Yeah.
Learning about the risks, putting together that emergency kit, having a plan, those things could actually save lives.
Absolutely. And it's just as important to share this knowledge with others, too.
Right.
Talk to your family, your friends, your community about what we've discussed today.
Right.
The more people who are informed and prepared, the better off we'll all be.
So I guess if we had to sum it all up, the message isn't be afraid. It's more like be aware, be prepared, and be empowered.
Perfectly said. We can't control everything that happens.
Yeah.
But we can control how we respond to the challenges that come our way. And that in itself gives me a sense of hope.
Me too. Me too. Well, on that note, we encourage you to explore the sources we've talked about, check out the websites, read the articles, and keep learning.
And don't forget the most important thing.
Which is?
Talk to your loved ones
Uh-huh.
about your own preparedness plans. Have those conversations. Make a plan together. And take comfort in knowing that you're not alone in this.
Well said.
Yeah.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Stay safe out there, everyone.